Jeff Cohen will be speaking about the corruption of corporate media, including the anti-Semitism smear, how mainstream media uses misleading IDs and labeling, and the importance of indie media and media activism. Jeff is a media critic, former commentator on MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN, former senior producer of MSNBC's Phil Donahue Show, founding director of the Park Center for Independent Media at Ithaca College, and he founded the media watch group FAIR and co-founded RootsAction in 2011. With that, Jeff, please take it away.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Can I talk bluntly tonight?
Absolutely. We hope you do.
All right. I've been a news media critic for 40 years, telling people that they cannot trust news outlets owned by conglomerates and instead should rely on independent media. I think that message is even more important today. For years, I worked in and around mainstream TV news, where I saw the bias and the censorship up close, especially in the run-up to the invasion of Iraq, when I was at MSNBC and I was terminated along with Phil Donahue for trying to ask the proper journalistic questions before our troops went to Iraq, destabilized the Middle East. Look at the media corruption today. The Disney Corporation, which owns ABC News and so much else, has offered what amounts to be a $15 million bribe that they've paid to Trump to settle a frivolous lawsuit against ABC News that legal experts say they could not possibly lose in a court of law. Everyone is now waiting for Paramount, which owns CBS News, Comedy Central, and so much more, to offer an even bigger bribe to Trump to settle a harassment lawsuit against CBS 60 Minutes that Paramount cannot possibly lose in a court of law. And soon after that bribe is paid and the Trump administration approves the Paramount merger, the boss of Paramount, Sherry Redstone, will be nearly $2 billion richer than she is today. It's hard to be an ethical journalist at ABC or CBS News, which is why the boss of CBS 60 Minutes, along with others, has resigned in protest. And there have been journalistic resignations at the LA Times, the Washington Post, because of censorship mandated or sparked by their billionaire bosses. The Washington Post, owned by the fourth richest man on earth, Jeff Bezos of Amazon. And that's where an award-winning political cartoonist had to quit after they killed a cartoon that showed Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, and other billionaires at the feet of Donald Trump, offering Trump bundles, bags full of money. I launched FAIR back in 1986. In those first years, I would run into one journalist after another that would say, wow, we appreciate that FAIR exists. We appreciate that FAIR is not like all these right-wing media bashing outfits that think all journalists are communists. But one after another would tell me that FAIR was off base on one big issue, and that was what they called our obsession with corporate influence over the news. And I would hear, I've worked in the media for years and never once have I been told what I could or could not report. None of those journalists would make that claim in today's media environment. The good news is that independent media are growing, as they tend to do when social movements are growing, and the mainstream media coverage of those social movements is so nakedly biased, as it has been biased against the movements and the encampments against the genocide in Gaza. Let's get something clear that Dana Bash and Jake Tapper at CNN and so many others pretend not to understand. When I criticized the apartheid government of South Africa and called for a boycott, no one ever accused me of being anti-white, of hating white people. A difficult accusation because I am white. When I've criticized the government of China, I've never been accused of being an anti-Asian or anti-Chinese bigot. When I've criticized the governments of Saudi Arabia or Iraq or Iran, I was never called an Islamophobe. As was obvious, I was critical of these governments, not critical of Muslim people, not critical of a religion. So it's been an amazing achievement of the Israel Right or Wrong lobby, aided by the leaders of both Democrats and Republicans, and of course, much of the mainstream media, that when we criticize Israel or call for a boycott of the Israeli government over its racism, expansionism, genocide, we are accused of being anti-Semites, Jew haters. I've been a critic of the government of Israel for more than 40 years, and I've been a proud Jew the whole time. So it's a very neat trick aimed at protecting the Israeli government from criticism. And the powers that be in the mainstream media, I know many of them well, they are not intellectual giants, but they're smart enough, excepting those at Fox News, to know that they are perpetrating this hoax about anti-Semitism. And some do it out of fear that they will be accused. When I worked inside MSNBC's big newsroom, 2002, 2003, one producer after another approached me privately about their fears of retaliation when they honestly covered the issue of Israel-Palestine. It was the only issue they ever got into trouble over. And this was 2 decades ago. I believe the problem is even worse today. I want to mention one item of media literacy that news consumers should always be aware of, and then I will end with some good news. As a news consumer, you need to be on high alert whether you're listening to NPR or watching CNN or PBS, reading the New York Times. Whenever you see or hear a source or a guest identified only as a former government official, whenever that happens, your antenna should go up because you are probably being lied to. There's a gentleman's agreement in mainstream media that these former officials will only be identified that way, even if they left government 5, 10, 15 years ago, and they won't be identified by what they are currently doing, which is information that you as a news consumer may find even more important in weighing what you are being told. You're not told if these guests or sources are currently working for this or that corporation or consulting for this or that corporation, or what corporate boards that they are on. In the 1990s, when NPR was putting on what they called debates about healthcare reform, and they would feature, it seemed balanced, they featured a former Republican Congress member and a former Democratic Congress member, and the listeners of NPR had no clue that both of these formers who dismissed single-payer government-provided health insurance, what we now call Medicare for all, dismissed it out of hand, and the listeners weren't told that currently both of those former Congress members were lobbyists or consultants for-profit healthcare interests. In 2002 and 2003, when I was at MSNBC, NBC and MSNBC kept presenting a guy who was relentlessly pushing for war, retired General Barry McCaffrey. Not told to the viewers of NBC or MSNBC is that McCaffrey, as he was pushing for war in Iraq, was on the boards of corporations that made millions of dollars from the war in Iraq. And viewers weren't even told that this guy was on the advisory board of the Committee for the Liberation of Iraq with a half dozen of the most hawkish neocons on planet Earth. Several times during the 2020 Democratic primaries, CNN trotted out a guy to bash Bernie Sanders, and he would only be introduced as a former deputy chief of staff for Obama, former Obama campaign manager. And unknown to CNN viewers, as he was bashing Bernie Sanders, this former Obama official was currently a communication specialist for all sorts of corporate interests that Bernie Sanders was a critic of, including Google, Uber, Amazon. And obviously, that kind of information would have been important for CNN viewers as they were weighing what they were being told by this guy about Bernie Sanders. But CNN didn't tell them what he was currently doing and had been doing for years. He'd left Obama 8 years earlier. Here's the good news. For the first time in US history, millions of people have access on a daily or even hourly basis to non-corporate and sometimes anti-corporate news. Never existed before. This uptick is because of the internet, which unfortunately is also responsible for an uptick in right-wing hate, disinformation, propaganda, division. On this call, we have these exceptional independent news outlets represented. Sonali with her Rising Up broadcast, Z Network, Mondoweiss. At the RootsAction Education Fund, we sponsor the progressivehub.net website, and we support the Zero Hour with RJ Eskow and Sonali. What I want everyone to do is add everything together. Add in Democracy Now! And Pacifica Radio and all the community radio stations. Add in the Young Turks and left-wing young podcasters. Add in dozens and dozens of websites, whether it's The Intercept or Common Dreams, Truth Out, and you have millions of people every day that are getting serious, journalistically sound, non-corporate news and analysis on the biggest issues of the day. They're not hearing a lot from these outlets about the Kardashians. We leave that to the corporate media. So if you're a progressive activist, you have to be a media activist, which means you use your email, you use social media, you use public forums, you use any means at your disposal to promote the independent news outlets that you trust. Those news outlets don't have big advertising or marketing budgets. We are their advertising department. And the second aspect of being a media activist, besides promoting indie outlets, is challenging media, mainstream media bias and exclusion. And you can do that as an individual, but it's more effective if you do that with organizations, collectively. And one of the best ways I know to do that is to sign up for the action alerts that you get from FAIR, the media watch group, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, and that's fair.org. Another great media literacy project is Project Censored, celebrating their 50th year. So when we started FAIR in the 1980s, after President Reagan had been caught on a hot mic making a joke about starting a nuclear war, we had a slogan back then, and it's unfortunately very appropriate today: better media active than radioactive. Ryan, I turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was an excellent presentation. I just learned a lot that I didn't know, and I have a bunch of questions. We don't have a lot of time, though, so if you could be as quick as you can with these answers. You talked about essentially bribes being paid via settlements. Is that new? Is this a brand new thing? Have we seen this before? I've never heard of anything like this.
I've never seen it before. I've never seen the media more corrupt, the media owners more corrupt than they are today. It's a new thing. Meta did it. They paid a huge bribe by settling a lawsuit they couldn't lose. So yes, it's a new thing, and it's horrific. And it's part of the reason that 60 Minutes, boss left the program. One of the most profitable programs in the history of TV, not just one of the most profitable news shows.
Right. And it's totally legal because it's literally through the courts. So
Yes.
very
Yeah.
bizarre.
Yes, it's legal. And everyone knows, everyone who works at these places knows these are bribes. And many of
Right.
these owners gave more than $1 million or more to sit in the front row of the Trump inauguration. That's also new.
Wow. Okay, a couple questions from people. Um, so when we're talking about independent journalists, where are they getting their news if they're not sitting in Gaza? And why should we believe that they're more accurate than like the BBC, for example?
Because the BBC isn't there. Independent media is relying on journalists, many whom have been killed inside Gaza. The independent media outlets are getting their information on the ground. And Robert Greenwald of Brave New Films has a new movie opening, a new documentary about the targeting of journalists working in Gaza. In many places, if you're in a war zone and you have the word press on your upper chest, that's a protection. In Gaza, it seems to be putting a target on your chest.
I would not wear a press thing in Gaza today. Zateo also had a short documentary about the Shireen Abu Akleh killing, so I'm glad that this is getting some attention now, but mainstream media missing. Um, Very quick, Midas Touch, the Midas Network, yes or no? How are you on that?
Yeah, I've learned some interesting stuff from them. It's not in my regular rotation, but
Sure.
I've watched it. I mean, what I've used as my homepage, and the folks over there know it for years. I've used commondreams.org as my homepage. I swear by
Right.
it.
Okay, last question. I'm going over, but I just have so many questions. I'm not going to get to most of them. So when someone is ID'd as a former government employee, they're really just a consultant to big tech or big oil. But this maybe I have to ask Jesse or someone. Someone pitched them to be on the show that clearly identified them in some way, or does the media just have a list of people that they go to that are
I think the
former?
media rounds up the usual suspects. And if they started, like Jim Messina, who kept going on, he's the Obama guy who kept going on CNN to bash Bernie. If he'd been identified as a corporate media consultant for Uber, Google, he probably wouldn't go on again. I mean, if they properly identified their guests, then that gentleman's agreement between these corporate guests and the corporate media would be out the window. But that information about what they're currently doing is far more important than what their government job was 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Right, way more influence outside of the government because there's money involved. Thank you so much, Jeff. I have lots more questions. I might send you via email so we can send out to people. Really great presentation. So much appreciated.